Atraxa is a card that was under a lot of people's radars, but from the time it has been legal from the release of Phyrexia All Will Be One, a lot of people have managed to break it. Today's game plan revolves around Glimpse. It has a lot of text, so to shorten it, it shuffles all the permanents you own into your library, and then you flip the top card that many times and put all the permanents into play. The strategy is to play a load of cards that put permanents into play on turns 1 and 2, and then use a cascade spell to get the Glimpse, spin the wheel, and win. This deck has always been a meme deck in Modern, but that can be said for a lot of archetypes in the format, just waiting for a busted card like Atraxa to be printed to revive the archetype. As I was seeing a lot of talk about Glimpse of Tomorrow with Atraxa online, I thought I would play this league for you guys to see if the deck is actually good. To start the first round, we're on the play and we have a pretty decent hand. While we have no way to put permanents into play on the early turn, we have 3 cascade spells and 2 lands, which is great against any disruptive deck. Something sad about playing Glimpse is not only do we not really cast anything on turn 1 and 2, we don't interact with the opponent, but when we get our third land here on turn 3, we can now Violent Outburst on their end step to play around a counterspell. On our end step, the opponent uses Eladamri's Call to fetch a Solitude. On the opponent's turn, they tap out for a Risen Reef. While I could slam this Violent Outburst on their end step, I actually want to take a draw step here because if I draw a land like Kalni Garden, I get insanely rewarded, and I just want more permanents in play because spinning for 3 is quite risky. However, we just draw Force of Negation, so I'm going to play this Shardless Agent and hope that we hit, and if not, then we get an extra permanent on the board for the Shardless Agent, which we can shuffle away with the Violent Outburst. Now, I'm not sure about the odds of this, but I literally shuffled and put into play the exact 3 lands that I had in play, so now we're going to Violent Outburst with an extra permanent on the board. But what are the odds of that, to shuffle away those 3 lands and flip them off the top of the deck? I have no clue, but what is good is we finally hit an Emrakul to put on the table. Now, slight problem here, Emrakul can't be countered, loads of text on it, but actually, Solitude can exile the Emrakul, so this isn't a win condition. We do have the mana to cast the Violent Outburst again, but we are going to get blown out by Solitude here. And blown out we do. The opponent follows up with an Omnath, Locus of Creation, drawing a card and triggering the Risen Reef, and then they evoke the Solitude, exiling the Emrakul, but also gaining us 15 life. Now we're going to have to pray that our third and final Glimpse from the deck is going to win from this Violent Outburst. Finding a Wave Sifter off the top of the deck is not what we needed, so we're going to have to do a random 4 permanents with this Glimpse. You know I'm going to say it, like an absolute beast, I flipped the perfect 4 cards off the top of the deck. Most importantly, finding an Omniscience. Omniscience is going to let me cast 2 Atraxas, looking at the top 20 cards in my library, trying to find another Emrakul to take an extra turn. From here, the game is super simple, just cast everything in my hand for free until I can find an Emrakul. The first Atraxa does whiff, we can take 2 cards off the top of the library with one with the Multiverse, then we can use the Atraxa to find the Emrakul, cast the Emrakul, take the extra turn, and the opponent concedes. I just want to say, if you enjoy my content, please click that subscribe button. Some people forget to press it, and it really does support the channel. Going into boarding, the opponent showed me only creatures, so I'm going to take out the 4 Force of Negation and bring in the Subtleties, because I assume the only interaction they're going to have is Teferi Time Raveler. Going into the next game, on the draw, 3 Cascade spells, 3 lands, there's not really much I can argue to mulligan this hand. What makes things even nicer is when I play a turn 1 Kalni Garden and pass back, the opponent misses their second land, so we're looking to be in a decent spot. I play my land, get in for 0, and the opponent follows up their next turn with a Chalice of the Void on 0. Chalice of the Void on 0 is really powerful here because Glimpse of Tomorrow is 0 mana, meaning that the Chalice will counter it if we cast it. Now we do have Boseiju and Otawara in our deck, but it's going to be difficult to draw them, so this is one of those games that you just got to play out when you have like 5% chance to win. We actually had a decent chance to win if the opponent kept missing their lands, but with an abundant growth of Fury and a Teferi Time Raveler, it almost made it impossible for us to win as they could just keep drawing cards, bouncing our cards, and removing them. After they found Wrenn and 6 and started casting some bombs, I just conceded, as let's be real, I can't kill both the Chalice and the Teferi. Boarding with this deck is really difficult. I do board in 2 Force of Negations for the Chalice, taking out a Gemstone Caverns and a one with the Multiverse, but honestly I found throughout this league it was hard to sideboard, as there's so many aspects you have to keep track of because putting more counterspells in your deck does dilute your glimpses. Now we did mulligan to 6 here. On the play, I decided to keep this hand. While we don't have blue mana for the Shardless Agent, we can easily draw it, and 2 Kalni Garden will make the Shardless Agent really good, as well as any subtlety or force of negation off the top, we can pitch a one with the multiverse to that card. Fortunately, on turn 2, we find a force of negation off the top, which gives us way more protection for the Chalice of the Void that they might have. Now the opponent starts off their second turn with Wrenn and 6. While they can minus the Wrenn and 6 to ping our tokens, I think it's still a bad choice to force the negation here, because if they're pinging, they're not getting back lands, as well as if they have a Chalice of the Void after I force, I instantly lose the game. They do plus on their land and then follow up with the Fury, so that's quite annoying, wiping the tokens, but I'm glad I didn't force the Wrenn. And we are even rewarded by this because they did have the Chalice of the Void. Now they've used 2 disruptive spells, it's unlikely they have a third, so while we do miss a blue source here, we should be fine because we should get a few more draw steps before they slam another thing. Yeah, that's basically game over. The opponent has a Teferi Time Raveler on the board, and it's going to be hard for us to remove it. I'm going to say that I think that this is just unfortunate for us. The opponent had so much Cascade hate. They do probably have 4 Teferi Time Ravelers main, and then just having the Chalices in the sideboard make them very favored post-board in this matchup. Super unfortunate. I probably made sideboarding mistakes, like this one with the multiverse could have been a force of negation, but yeah, we definitely were in a bad spot. Going into the next round, we're on the play and have to mulligan a clunky 7, but keep a very risky 6. The opponent has a Thoughtseize, Grief, or anything that interacts with the Shardless Agent, we are instantly punished, but because we have lands and Cascade Spell with the County Garden, it's definitely worth it. We start off the game with the County. The opponent and I just hit our land drops, and it shows that they're on blue-white control. Now, I think the opponent identifies what deck I'm on because they do Prismatic Ending the plant token to prevent me from having more permanents in play, but with them tapped down low, I'm going to slam the Shardless Agent, because if not, they'll probably counter it down the line. The opponent doesn't have a counterspell, and it resolves. We find an Atraxa, an Emrakul, and a one with the multiverse, actually the best 3 cards we could have found there, so now we can cast the Omniscience from our hand, get another Atraxa off the Atraxa trigger, and then keep casting our whole deck, and we eventually find the Emrakul. This deck is pretty consistent flipping 3 cards, or maybe I'm just really lucky. Going into game 2, we shred our hand down to 5 because we have just a really bad 6 and a really bad 7, and we get a Gemstone Caverns hand here with a Subtlety to start off game 2, which isn't terrible, but if we fast forward to turn 2, the opponent has a Chalice of the Void on 0 and a protective spell up, and we have the Boseiju in play, so we can't Boseiju it. So yeah, unfortunate start here for game 2, let's move on to the third one. Going into the third game, we keep a really nice opening 7, hoping that the opponent does not have a Chalice of the Void on 0. Now we do slam a turn 3 Shardless Agent, but they have a counterspell for our Glimpse. And then after finding a County Garden on their end step, I used Valakut Awakening to shuffle away all these rubbish cards in my hand, and found a Force of Negation and a Subtlety to help interact with the opponent. I kept using my 2/2 Shardless Agent to chip down the opponent's life and slam the second Shardless Agent, but they had another counterspell. The opponent then used a Prismatic Ending for 3 on my second Shardless Agent, and then when we slammed our third Shardless Agent, they had a Dovin's Veto for the Glimpse, but we still had a lot of pressure on the board if they don't answer it. After hitting the opponent down to 9, and then hitting the opponent down to 5, they fetch and shock to cast Supreme Verdict to try and wipe my board and stop the pressure. But with a Subtlety and Force of Negation on their end step, we won the game without resolving Glimpse of Tomorrow. Now things didn't always go perfectly. In round 3, I had an amazing game 1 win with Glimpse of Tomorrow, but in both games 2 and games 3, they had Chalice of the Void again. Quite unfortunate. Then in round 4, again, game 1 easily crushed the opponent, but they had Chalice of the Void again. Yes, all 4 rounds my opponents had Chalice of the Void. Quite awkward, but sometimes your opponents have the sideboard cards. Do I think this deck is good? Yes, but I think we just got Magic the Gathering. Richard Garfield made sure that all of our opponents had the Chalice of the Void, so we couldn't roast them for printing the Atraxa. What do you think about this deck? Let me know in the comment section down below, but for now I'm going to drop this league and let you see this video because YouTube thinks you'll like it.